Hi guys, it's Clay Week, just about everybody's favorite art supply. We're going to learn different techniques for using our clay. So come on down to the board and let's see what we're going to make this year. Clay, we love clay. It's super messy and it's super fun and it's something that everybody seems to enjoy. For 8th grade this year, we're going to make some containers, and you are going to make a container that is at least 4 inches tall and at least 4 inches wide, and it has to have a lid that's removable. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to remember all the different tricks and techniques that we've used over the last 8 years that I've had you. Ever since kindergarten, we've used clay every year that you've had art class, except maybe last year. So we're going to try and figure out some of those different ways of attaching clay and of forming and working with clay to try and get your little container. The clay that I've got for you to use in the classroom fires at a temperature of around 2,000 degrees, so we don't have to worry about any residual bacteria or viruses hanging out on this clay. The best way to attach a piece of clay is to make what we used to call at the elementary school the zipper. So if you remember, we took our piece of clay and we decided that we were going to make scratch marks on one side, and that will become the teeth of our zipper. So let's say I was going to attach these two pieces just like this. I'm going to take my tool, whatever tool I have. I can use a pencil, I can use my fingernails, whatever you've got. And I'm going to create scratch marks. Then I'm going to add a little bit of either water or slip. At the middle school we use a little clay water mixture, and I'm just going to tap it into those little sections. That makes it like the pull part of the zipper. We talk about that in elementary, how the teeth of the zipper kind of stick together like this, and it makes a better connection than if you were to put pieces together just straight, because the straight connection can slide around, but something like this will not. So I'm going to take those teeth and I'm going to give that a little push, and then I'm going to smooth it out with my fingers, and I have a connection that should not go anywhere. So that's how you connect pieces of clay. If you have a rolling pin handy, we can roll out this clay to make a nice smooth surface. Looks like I'm going to use a glue stick. I'm working on a piece of paper. At the middle school, we'll be working on a piece of canvas so it doesn't stick to the table. If you don't have paper or canvas, you can use newspaper. You can use an old pillowcase or any kind of fabric. That would work also to keep it from sticking to the table. I do like to remove it every now and then to make sure it's not sticking to the surface, even though the paper should not make it stick to the table. So once you decide what you're going to make, you have to decide how you're going to make it. This clay I'm going to roll out into a nice flat rectangle, and I'm going to think back to 6th grade when I made a mug. Remember how you made your little slab-built mug? We took a piece of clay, we cut a rectangle, that's your slab, and then all we did to form it was roll that rectangle around on itself. And then I create a nice cylinder. I would, of course, need to cut a bottom for my cylinder. So let's stick that guy right on there, cut out the bottom. Oh, the cricket's back. And I would use my slipping and scoring technique to get those two pieces connected. But now I have the beginnings of a wonderful little container. Your lid, you can make your lid. It's a nice round container also, a round piece also. Ta-da! There's a round container. Obviously does not meet the requirements. It is only 2 inches high and is only 2 inches wide, but that is how to build using a slab. Now, what if I want to build something that's square? Well, you can use the exact same technique. You can build individual slabs for each corner. Let's cut that on a triangle just for fun. Maybe you want to build them one at a time, just like you're putting up the walls of a house. So I will build this wall, and then I would build the next wall, and then I would build the last wall. that's creating a geometric shape, square, rectangle, something with corners and points. And then of course I would need to cut out a piece for my lid, probably the correct size. And there's a lid. Maybe add a cute little handle. Don't forget, you need to do all of these connecting steps with the slipping and scoring technique. So you must use the scratch marks. You must use a tiny little bit of water and or slip if you have some at your house. And then we will be able to make sure that those connections will not fall apart once it gets dried out and fired in the kiln. What if I decide that this shape that I've got going on here is interesting, but obviously it's not tall enough? Well, there's other ways that you can build using your clay, but you have to think back to elementary school for it. So the other technique that everybody uses, especially when they go back to their Play-Doh playing years, is we make the coil snake. This is a coiling technique. And this works great to make the project just a little bit more interesting. I would need to add a little bit of your slip mixture on the top just to make sure that that coil snake is not going to jump off. And then you start attaching it to your project. You can build your project up layer by layer using this coiling technique. And you can also think about making something interesting in the designing process, because it doesn't have to be just straight one piece on top of the other. You may decide that you want to see some swirls, or you may decide that you want to see some empty spaces, so you have holes in the center. So you could take the coil and you could create some kind of decoration with the coil itself. There's nothing that says you can't have these open areas in the side of your project. You see how quickly you can build up your container just by adding your coils. Am I close to my measurement? Oh, not quite. I'm only around 3 inches, but I can continue building. I could even put a slab on top of this yet, but I would caution you to maybe not build it quite as tall as humanly possible right away, because the clay does have a point where it just decides it has had enough. We've worked with it enough and it will not cooperate any longer. And you quickly find that out when you try to build something really tall or really thin and the clay just says, nope, nope, I'm done. And it just kind of falls down on you. That happens sometimes. So just keep an eye on your clay and you'll tell pretty quickly when you've just done enough work for one day. So there's a combination of slab and coil building. This is very rough, and you would want to take some more time to smooth things out and make the surface a little bit more interesting to look at just by smoothing it out, making it look intentional. All right, the last thing we want to talk about is, let's talk about the surface textures of your project. There's nothing wrong with plain, smooth clay, but it is plain and smooth. And so sometimes you maybe have decided that you want to have something a little bit more interesting to look at on the side of your container. And there are many different ways that we can make that a little bit more interesting to look at. I can just use the rolling tool that I'm using right now. And if you can see what's happening when I roll against the clay with the end of this tool, I get some interesting little designs going on. Or I could maybe press into the clay to make some kind of decoration. You can do this with just about any tool that you have handy. You can always use a pencil and draw your design also. Look around for some things in your house that might make some interesting surface decoration. Now here at school we have these texture plates, and this is a piece of plastic with some hot glue stretched back across it, and this is actually a texture plate of some kind of animal print or flowers. I don't really know what that is, but you can use these in the same way. You can just press them down into the clay, and then you have some interesting design that shows up. This is actually a piece of a McDonald's takeout container. My daughter loves the pancakes, so you've got this nice little surface area on here, and you can press that into the clay. In either direction, you can either press it in so that you end up with like golf ball like dimples, or you can do the reverse so that you're going to end up with these little pieces that stick up in the air. Also some interesting surface. And then of course if I wanted to use this, I could go back in and I would cut out my design, or I would create the slab and I would use the piece that has the design on it to make the rest of my container. All right, let's see what kind of interesting containers you can create. Don't forget, they have to be 4 inches, at the very minimum 4 inches tall and 4 inches wide, and they should have a lid that is removable. Good luck. Last part, always take a pencil, put your name on the bottom. Please do not just use your initials. You're going to need to use your entire first name and maybe a last initial.